Hello everyone, it's the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. My name is Natalie Trudell. I am the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Outperform. Pleasure to have you with me here today. I want to get started with a bit of a poll. Let's break the ice here. So I'm just going to ask you something nice and light right now. What's your fuel? What type of beverage do you have beside you today? So go ahead and just make an answer and let's see what everybody else has. I have coffee. You should get a little pop-up. You should be able to select some items. All right, so it looks like we have a lot of coffee and a lot of water. I like that. We have no tea drinkers on the call today. Coffee, a little tea. That's good. That's good. Tea and coffee and water, they're all neck and neck. Coffee's just going to win. All right, well, I am an iced latte lover personally. Thank you for sharing with me. I'm just going to let you guys know how everybody replied. Tea and water were close seconds. All right, so hopping back in here, let's get into the presentation. All right, so I have a few things I'd like to get through today. I'm going to be taking you through some common performance management challenges that we see, and more importantly, some fixes that you can apply so that you can create a performance management program with impact. I'm going to talk a little bit about why that's important, because study after study that's coming out is showing that the return you get when you have an effective performance management program in place, you can't really deny it. So we'll walk through some of those things, and then we'll run through 7 tips from us on how to create performance reviews with impact. So small changes that you can make today, leading up to mid-year, leading up to year end, that will really transform that process for your managers, your employees, as well as your HR teams. And then I'll take you through a little bit of a tour of Outperform. With that, let's just dive in. For those who are not familiar with Outperform, we have been in the performance management and HR technology space for over 20 years now. We're one of the very, very few standalone performance management platforms that actually offers flexibility, usability that most organizations need in order to execute an effective performance management program. So if you're not familiar with Outperform, I highly encourage you to visit our website. We have a ton of great resources on there for you, as well as a direct way to connect with us. But really, we work very closely with organizations, whether they're new to performance management automation, they've had a system in place or a process in place for years and they need to revamp it, or they're just looking to make sure that they're getting the most out of this. So the most common things we hear when we work with new clients is that they're struggling with consistency, accuracy, the process. They really need a way to engage employees in year-round performance development, coaching, and feedback, and they're struggling to make that work. We also hear that being able to tailor the performance management program based on the job is a challenge, and it is tricky. We actually worked with a hospital out of Florida who managed 142 versions of performance reviews because they had accreditation requirements they had to show. So, there's a lot of operational things involved in performance management challenges, as well as people challenges, we all know. So we need a way to give managers tools, help them give feedback, make sure that they're being consistent, they're being coaches and everything. But we also need a way to align objectives in teams. That's a big challenge we see when we work with new clients, is they say, we need to make sure everyone's working on the right things and that they're clear on it and they're in agreement and we can track the progress towards those company goals. It seems small, but I think the biggest complaint we hear is completing reviews on time. HR is usually chasing everybody down. It's a bit of a nightmare, especially if you're not using software and you're trying to manage it with a Word document or an Adobe document. It's just difficult to make sure things are completed on time. That really backs up HR decision making. I don't need to tell you that, but it's also a bad experience for employees. If they have coworkers that are getting evaluated and theirs is 2 weeks late, what does that say about them and their importance? So having that consistency, making sure things are completed on time, making sure you can trust the information so you can use it for decision making. These are all very real challenges that we see. There's a list of 20 more, but these are the most common. So I actually want to do one more quick poll. I want to know what your biggest performance management challenges are. And you can select all of them if you'd like, but I really put the top ones here that we hear, mainly around consistency, whether that's consistency in the process, consistency in the input or the output, really the perceived impact or value of those reviews, the time and the resources needed to administer or complete those reviews. And then a big one is engaging those different types of employee groups. And then finally, adoption. We can have the best plans and programs in place, but if it's not adopted properly, or if people don't see the value in it or the excitement, it can be a big challenge. So go ahead and mark your kind of top ones. And I'll let that kind of filter in for a couple of seconds. It's interesting because I can see the results as they're coming in. I'm going to close this and share because I want everybody to be able to see everyone else's challenges. So consistency, just as I thought, that's at the top. We can't control individuals, but if employees aren't getting a consistent experience, if you're not certain that your performance management mandates are being actually applied, how do you know you're getting the most out of it? Time and resources is second place, and that's no joke. We have some organizations reporting weeks, if not months of time on this process. So when we even broach the topic of increasing the frequency of those reviews or that feedback, they don't even want to entertain that because they can't, just from a sheer, capacity standpoint. Engaging different types of employees, that's what we're going to focus a lot of the chat on today, because that is your biggest opportunity to transform your performance reviews. It's to not take a whitewashed approach. We're here to encourage you to tailor reviews for different groups. And if you have the right platform and the right templates, it's really easy to do that. Now, impact and adoption, those are all key, but I totally agree that the top three are big pain points. Let's get into it. Why should we care? Why do we even have to do anything about it? And I was saying at the beginning of the session, so many numbers keep coming out daily, it seems, on the impacts of effective performance management in an organization. And we just published an ebook and an infographic on our website. You can go and grab that. But I'm going to highlight some of those stats for you right now. Just from a sheer financial performance, employee productivity, and business outcomes, those are impacted directly from the quality of your performance management program in place. Some other interesting things to note, company revenue. Studies show that companies can only save a lot of time operationally, and that can be massive. Our own clients report roughly 2 hours of time spent per review. But if they start using our compensation management functionality, it turns into weeks and months. So it really depends on where you're at now, but there's no question that if we can automate, facilitate, streamline, get rid of noise, it's going to save you a ton of time, and time means money, right? We need your HR team focused on strategic initiatives. They cannot be gathering paper reviews. But even things like cost savings, being able to reduce turnover even by a fraction can save a ton of money. One of your senior leaders, it usually costs around 400 times, 400% of their salary to replace them. Talent is hard to find, it's expensive to replace, and more than that, if we can get more out of that talent, it's good for them, it's good for the company. So the more we can identify and develop staff, the better for the company. Moving along around clarity in the employee experience, because we definitely don't want to discount that. Employees who have a clear, easy way to set and track goals are far more likely to be engaged, committed, and motivated. And I know you all know this. I know we say it all the time. It's easier said than done, but it's always worth remembering, because I remember my very first performance review out of university, and I sat down with my manager, and one of my goals was the company revenue targets. And I did not understand that. I was not in a sales position. I didn't know what it meant. It wasn't helpful. And I think because of all of the challenges that we've discussed already, you can't tailor 400 versions of performance reviews, but we need to find a way to be able to, because if an employee doesn't sit down and see a very clear vision of what they should be doing on a day-to-day basis, what success looks like, what it means for them, and what help they have, your program's not going to be as effective as it can be. So let's find a way to, create an easy way to recognize progress, to set and track clear goals, and to make sure that it's all aligned together so everyone's working towards the same objectives. And finally, the employee experience. Again, employees that get more feedback are happier. Now, that is a blanket statement. We all work with people. We have colleagues and people we manage who they never seem to need feedback, and they're totally happy, and that's great. But for the most part, I think it's human nature to want recognition. We want to know how we're doing. We want to know we're valued. We want to know frequently those things so we know if we're on the right track, and just enabling feedback. And that doesn't mean just enabling more check-ins. It means coaching managers, giving them tools so that when they're giving feedback, that feedback is effective. It matters. We've seen a lot of bad feedback in our day, and I'm sure you have too. So if we can improve that, employees are going to feel it and you're going to see the results. So like I said, we have this ebook on our website. Go ahead and get it. A lot of good statistics if you're looking to justify kind of a revamping of your performance management program. But all that to say is the impacts are massive, but the changes really don't have to be. We've been doing this for a really long time, and we see that there are some small changes you can make to your reviews, your program, that are really going to translate to results. Okay, and this is of course going to depend on where you're coming in and what you're doing. So some of these you might already be doing, and that's fantastic. I always think it's a good reminder. So I'm going to start with the first one, which tends to be a little controversial. Ask employees to self-assess. We are still pretty surprised with how many new clients we work with who do not ask employees to self-assess. And that's either because they don't have the time to solicit that portion of the review. Employees, haven't been formally trained on how to do that, and they don't have time. Most organizations want to, they just don't know how to or how to use that. So we're here to say it's worth it. Even if you ask the employee 2 questions, it's worth it. Having the employee be an active part of their career, their performance, that feedback is going to make a manager's job a lot easier. It's going to get the employee involved and engaged, and it's going to impact the company. So we say empower your employees, increase that accountability where it's possible. We have a lot of great blogs on our website too about the self-assessment and ways you can position that. But I'm just telling you, being able to really reflect on your own performance in key areas, in goals, in your career, that's going to aid the conversation. You're going to get more out of it. So this is a screen grab directly from Emperform. It's part of a competency-based self-assessment. And you can see the employees allowed to rate themselves. They're allowed to comment on it. But then we ask them, what do you need? What do you need from your manager, the company? What support would you like? And how you want to word that is really up to you. But the whole point is that we're trying to get the employee to think about it. So it's not just up to the manager. And that when the manager is trying to give feedback, they have this whole new vantage point they can use to provide better feedback. So that's just one example. Another one, sorry, I went too fast. Goals. That's the best way to involve the employee. Even if you don't want them doing a full competency rating, ask them to track their goals or their development, and don't limit them to once a year. Give them access all year so they can be tracking that progress. If managers see progress, they can acknowledge it. Most of the time, it keeps goals way on track because it's nice that I can see how goals are at the quarter mark or at the mid-year mark. So this is an example of, again, in Emperform where employees can go in, they can mark the achievement of goals, they can add comments, and if you're asking them to go in multiple times during the year, let's say mid-year, all of that input is right there. Very simple changes, big impact. Another way to get the employee involved is ask them where they want to be. That is a powerful question. Ask the employee. You don't have to ask them when they think they're ready for a promotion, but if you just ask them, what are your future goals, your future career plans? How can we facilitate it? They know you care. I've experienced both worlds, and it makes a massive impact when an employee knows that a company cares about where they want to go and is willing to work with them on it. We get far more out of good, invested, engaged talent. And if we can identify that early on and really nurture it, you're growing your future leaders. You're growing the type of DNA and culture that you want in your organization. So we say, even if this is an evaluation for an intern, ask them where they want to be. It's going to open up a really interesting conversation. It's going to give you insight. But again, it's that long-term plan we're taking with the employee. All right, number 2, look at your forms. Look at your forms. I'm going to repeat that again. Look at your forms. If I can offer some tips, it's looking at it with the 3 Ps, people, process, and purpose. You'll notice that if you try to make one performance review that's going to work across your whole organization, it's not going to be valuable for anybody. Really think about who should really be involved in that performance review. Is it an employee and the manager? Is it just the manager? Is it an employee and their colleagues and a supervisor? Is there a department director that should, oversee all of this? Should HR be involved for checks and measures along the way? Who really needs to be in there? And if someone doesn't need to be in there, take that into account. We're going through performance reviews right now, and it's nice and simple because we have it set up very streamlined in our organization. But you can imagine we've worked with some clients that before directors were just getting alerts every day and they had hundreds and hundreds of things to review for no purpose. What was the purpose of that? So if we can put the right measures in place before, put the right governance in place before, then hopefully one single director doesn't have to look at 100 reviews to approve them. They're just approving anything that's kind of outstanding or irregular. The other thing to look at is your process. Does it make sense for everybody? And I'll tell you right now, your IT department's not going to meet quarterly, and normally they don't have to, but your sales department does. Other employees, it might be a formal mid-year with a couple checkpoints. We really encourage our clients to think of that process as what works for that department or group or type of employee, because it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. The last one is about purpose. Start from where you want to be and then design your review program to suit that. What are you going to take out of this performance program? Pick those top 3 initiatives. Is it so that you can better plan succession gaps? Is it so that you can, increase revenue by making sure those sales goals are aligned? Is it to engage employees or create a better onboarding experience for new employees? There's always those top 3 to 5 main objectives you're looking to achieve. And then we can design your performance management program as such. You do not have to do things just because the Deloittes of the world do it or the Adobes of the world do it. We have yet to see 2 organizations in 20 years who do things exactly the same. And that's because every single organization has a different culture, a different purpose, and it's okay to design your performance management program like that. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of forms today. Here's one, actually. This is a pretty good extensive one. It'd probably be more for an operational team member. It's balanced with goals and skills as well as development. And then at the end of the year, it really opens it up to thinking ahead. Next year's goals, career planning, check-ins. We would say this is a really well-balanced review, but this is overkill for some employees. If you have interns or hourly staff, that might be too much. So that's all I'm saying is look at the forms, look at the process, and you can make changes accordingly. All right, we talked a lot about goals. My next tip is about think a little bit beyond goals. And I mentioned a few of those items already. Career planning and development is big. Open that up. There might be things that aren't goals, but you want to work with the employee on a more informal capacity and they have a safe space to develop. You can get that in the performance review. Engagement and satisfaction is big. We have a lot of clients post-COVID that mid-year, they open up a little bit of a pulse survey for employees just to do a little check-in on them. How do you feel? Are you getting enough feedback? We care. So get creative with what you're asking, and it's okay to balance it and be combined. You can have a formal skill assessment alongside a how are you feeling or a career discussion. And in fact, if everything's all in one place, it actually makes that discussion a lot easier. But like I said, employees want to know what's expected of them, not only from their job, but what's needed to get better, get to the next level, achieve their career goals. We're also seeing a lot of values being worked in to performance reviews. If you are going down the path of tailoring performance management for groups, something to think about is you still need some sort of unifying thread. And usually that's values. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, these are the core values that really anchor our company and they have to be observed. Get those in there. That way you can have different types of reviews, but those values will always be observed. Okay. If there's one thing you can do immediately right after this session is go look at your rating scales. I really can't say this enough. Most of the rating scales we see are just not very good. And no matter how good your performance review is, the wrong rating scales will cast a very dark shadow on everything. So we do have a whole ebook with some proven rating scales. You can go and download that right now. It talks about how to use rating scales the right way for those different evaluation criteria. It even talks about how we shouldn't really be showing numbers. There is a way to rate employees so that you get metrics in decision making, but the number's not going to detract for the conversation. There's also a way to introduce governance in those ratings so that you're not forcing unnecessary work where it's not needed, just on the ups and downs and the anomalies. Please go ahead, take a look at your rating scales. We have some really, really good ones. There is a way to have ratings so they don't feel and look like rating scales, but your company can benefit from those great analytics. At the end of the day, we do need measures. We've seen over the last, 10 years, companies eliminate ratings, and most of them have brought them back because it is good to have those open discussions and to ask the questions, but also the company needs to know who are your future leaders, where are your skill gaps, where do you need to invest in development, which managers are doing the best, which employees can move into different projects. So you have to monitor those key kind of performance and talent data to make decisions, but we can't have that be the center of everything and completely undo everything you're trying to do. So rating scales, number 1, I should have put that number 1, not number 4. It's just some quick tips. Match your rating scale to your content. Consider masking your numbers. Force comments on what's important. And if you have them, use them. So if you are going to analyze your rating scales, make sure that you have the reports queued up that you want to look at and use them. All right, we're going through these quickly. Number 5 is about bias, and that's just because we're all human. We all don't think we are. We all think we're a little bit better, and it doesn't happen to us, but it does. There's some key biases that really do creep their way into performance reviews without anyone knowing it. Of course, we can educate managers and staff on bias so that they're aware of what it is and they can try to recognize it. Some really common ones are that recency bias. Jim did really well on that project last week, so I'm rating his performance as perfect because I just don't remember what happened 10 months ago. The horns and halo is usually a really common one. You have favorable light on an employer, they do something really well, so it really does mask some of the things that you need to work with them on. The primacy bias, kind of opposite of recency, and you can look all these up. We have all that on our website. But the idea is there are things that are going to impact your performance reviews that are just because of human nature, and it's okay. So we have to educate managers, but we would say go a step further and just try to eliminate what's causing that bias. Time is causing that bias, and I'm telling you right now, time and blind spots. If we can just increase the frequency of meetings or check-in and documentation, it's going to eliminate a lot of that bias, or at least help a lot. That's where those frequent check-ins come in, year-round meetings, documentation, journal notes. That's going to have everything in front of you. And I'll give you an example. I use mPerform to track notes. We have something called Tag. It's for journaling. So whenever I meet with an employee, I make a couple notes, or if I notice something, I make a couple notes. And I'm not too worried about them because no one sees them, but I have them. And I can't tell you how many times I sat down to have a meeting or complete a review, and there were things that I would have completely forgotten about. And maybe not forgotten, but I would have forgotten about its significance in the moment. So if we can just give one place where everyone can just put down observations, when they are sitting down to analyze this, they'll have a better representation of what happens. Managers are human, and it's impossible to remember back. I don't remember what I had for breakfast 2 days ago, but sometimes we're asking managers to sit down and rate performance for an entire year. I think that's a big ask. Let's give them help documenting and using that inside of performance reviews. Let's also open things up. The biggest complaint we hear from employees is that reviews aren't fair. And sometimes it's just because of the way it's structured, but mostly it's because employees work with a lot of people. They work with other managers. They work with other departments. And what if they see their manager once a month? Well, that's not fair. That person's rating me, and they don't even see all the great work I do. On the other side of things, managers could be missing some things. Peer assessments, we're a big fan of 360s. There's different flavors of 360s, so they don't have to be so severe, and they're completely self-service. But we find it very beneficial in most organizations to have that peer feedback. In a lot of our healthcare clients, they do physician reviews, bottom-up reviews. In our project-based organizations, they use 360s for project assessments. But just in any organization where your employees are working with people, and they are, it's always good to ask them and get that input because those blind spots could be pretty damaging. The right rating scales and governance will help with bias as well. Go and take a look at your rating scales right now and really think, could they be misinterpreted? Could they be skewed? A really good example of that is we have seen bottom-up surveys before Emperform from our clients where it was 3 ratings. They're rating their manager. And it's, I strongly agree, I agree, or I disagree. And it seems fine, but it isn't. No employee is ever going to say disagree if they think that that's going to raise a flag. It also just doesn't give them an option for being accountable for that feedback and being comfortable going to people if they have input. So most employees end up just rating agree, and then you're not getting any value of that data anyways. Back to rating scales again. And training managers is really important, and that's more than one-time training. It's really letting managers know how important this is, how impactful their feedback and their ratings are, what it means for them, and really making sure that that training is reinforced over and over again. Here's some examples of things. So this is what I was talking about. This is a screen grab of a performance review in Emperform. You can see that I've made some check-in notes, but I've been able to drop in some journals that I had made during the year to support that. That's just a lot easier for me, but it's also a better conversation to say, hey, we talked about this a few times, or this feedback was shared with me a few times. This is also a screenshot of a 360 survey. Imagine before you go in to rate your employees, you see what 4 or 5 other people observe about the frequency of those behaviors or that competency or that value. So it just makes things a lot easier. We could have rated Ashley as perfect in communication, but then we see that 360 input indicates maybe a little bit of different story, and we have to dig into that a little bit more. I will say most of the time, 360 feedback is a happy story. There's usually a lot of good things your employees are doing, and no one ever sees it. But once in a while, especially for leadership, they want to know what those gaps are. They want to know what to work on. The 6th is look ahead. We are big fans of the 20/80 rule. 20% of any review or meeting should be recapping and discussing and just clarifying, getting on the same page, and 80% should be looking ahead. It's a good conversation. It's a good way to get through things. It lets you plan for opportunities and development, set goals, adjust course. And HR's role is really to facilitate that with this performance management program. It's to design your reviews and your process in a way that it's saying, okay, good, what's next, what do we do? And I'll show you an example of that. So here is, at the end of the year in Emperform, a new section pops up for setting next year's goals. That just makes sense. If they're evaluating this year's goals, they should absolutely be thinking about that and setting next year's goals at the exact same time. It saves time. It's just logical, and it really does help that conversation, and it results in much better, more honest goals being set year after year after year. Or cycle after cycle. It doesn't have to be a year. And the last point I have is just reflect. We're all human. HR's human. We don't get it right all the time, and that's okay. Companies are also changing really quickly, and employees, the mix of different generations and what's expected is also always changing. So just because you develop a performance management program this year and you're launching it, look at it and see how it's doing. Ask for feedback and adjust. The most successful clients that we have are the ones that aren't afraid to adjust, because that only keeps it valuable and relevant. And sometimes we don't think about the small nuanced details that really impact employees and managers. And if we start to look at that and adjust accordingly, we're going to increase that adoption, which is one of the biggest challenges. Embrace technology to help that automation. Adapt in phases. You don't have to do everything at once. You can start small and grow so that your users are comfortable. You want to keep asking managers and employees what's working for them, what they like, what they don't. You're also going to want to champion some users in your organization to get them on board and help you with that adoption, and communicate the why. So we do have a change management communication guide. If you're interested, you could contact me after this webinar. But that's something that we start, even before we start planning Emperform, is we start communicating to the workforce why this is coming for them, right? Hey, we listened to you. We're going to be launching this new program. This is how you're going to be trained. This is what it means for you. This is what you're going to get out of it. This is what you're going to get out of it if you're a manager. And communicating that really sets them up to know that it's a program that's made for them and it's going to benefit them. We do have all the resources I've mentioned. I'll share this deck with you so that you have it. Ton of good stuff for sure. Hopefully that was useful. What I'd like to do in the next 10 minutes is just give you a little tour of all of that in action in mPerform so you can get some ideas. For those, again, who are not familiar with mPerform, we are a performance management platform. We are standalone. A lot of our clients are using UKG, ADP, Workday. They have some sort of central HR system that we integrate with, but they really need flexibility and usability and the tool set that we deliver. So that's really where we come in. So we have a full solution that's really based around these reviews, and we augment it with journaling and feedback, peer input, surveys, and we work really closely with our clients to make sure that we're designing things even down to the rating scales so that it works, so that you can trust that data. You could feed it into reporting. You can use it for compensation planning. You can use it for succession planning. And the biggest value is we set it up and it runs on its own. mPerform is fully automated. So once we set it up, it knows who has to do what. It keeps everyone updated with status reports, but it's really alerting users if something is needed from them. Integration is something no matter what. There's a lot of HR systems out there. You have payroll, you have LMS, you have performance, you have recruiting, you have core HR. There's very few systems that can accommodate everything HR needs. So when you look at different systems, look at that integration, because if you can get the systems talking to one another, then from a user standpoint, they don't notice a difference. From a data standpoint, you can trust it and you don't have to manage it. So I just wanted to highlight that if you are looking at the automation route, make sure that integration between your systems is set up and working great. All right, I'm going to show you around mPerform. Welcome. I want to show you mainly two samples of performance reviews that I was talking about because I find it easy to visualize. So welcome to mPerform. Very, very usable platform. You can see, and what I see depends on, am I a director, am I a manager, am I an employee? But you'll notice that everything I need to do is right here on my dashboard, my home screen. So I have two reviews I'm going to take you through, and then I have another example that I think you're really, really going to like. I think that together will give you some good ideas of some of the tips that I've been giving you in play. So let's start super simple. Let's start with a performance review that's designed for maybe a field team member or a part-time team member. So really it's going to be very short. You can see from the workflow, the manager fills it in. HR takes a look, they have a meeting, and then it's done. It's nice and simple. You'll also know that it's really based around competencies and career planning. These competencies are related to the job. That's the important thing. The questions are related to this employee so that it's a very tailored experience. Even for rating competencies, we don't want to give the manager the option to be biased here. What if this employee was completely late all the time at the beginning of the year and the manager kind of forgets that? So what we can do to eliminate the bias is look at the rating scale, but look at what we're getting them to rate. Instead of rating a humongous category like attendance, break that attendance down into some questions or some behaviors. Then the manager just has to answer questions about things they actually remember. If you're using a platform like this, it'll handle the ratings, it'll handle adding everything up, but you can see that that can greatly facilitate and reduce bias. This is also an example of how you can ask managers for anything that you need to report on potential. Just because it's in here, it doesn't mean the employee has to see it. But if you want to be able to use that gauge of performance alongside a gauge of potential, like yes or no, are they a flight risk? Are they ready for promotion? Can they move into another level? That's very powerful information. So here would be where you could ask it. It might take the manager 20 seconds, and they're already in here. So we are big fans of looking at potential, looking at career, looking at progression, and being able to analyze those results alongside performance for decision making. Okay, so one example of a review. Let's go see another one. All right. So another one I'm going to show you in two phases. Let's look at it at the start of the cycle, and then let's go see what it looks like at the end, because that's something really important to consider. You do not want to give employees and managers a 26-page document in January and say, have fun. We really want to get rid of the noise. So at the beginning, when they're setting expectations, that's all we want them to focus on. So you can see it's very clear here that they just have to set goals, set development. We even like to surface things from their job description or the position to help them set these items or remind them of things. So there's a lot of small creative things you can do so that when they're in here, it takes 3 seconds. Then, of course, at the end or during the year when they have to track this, everything is there for them to track. They can come, they can rate goals. If the employee's involved, it is really important that their ratings and their comments be visible to the manager. It's also important that we govern the ratings. We don't want to govern everything. HR doesn't have time to review all the comments for everyone, but we definitely want to know if a goal was deferred, or we definitely want to know if a goal was canceled. So that type of governance is going to make sure that you're focusing on the areas that are important. So I just said this goal was deferred, so mPerform is going to make me go in and actually add my comments, which is very nice. You can also notice that the employee's complete history during the year is here, which is very helpful for the manager. Now, I talked about reducing bias with notes, and I'm going to talk about that again, because when I'm rating a goal, or if I'm rating a skill, or if I'm trying to come up with a development action for the employee, I want to be able to access all of the notes that I've been taking, all of the feedback that's been shared, all of those observations. I need it to be here. Whether I just want to sort through, or if I want to actually come in here and use any of this as support, that needs to be available inside the performance review, or else managers will never use it. So if we teach managers how to create a few more notes, send a little bit more feedback, that's great. You'll get a lot out of it. But if you can then tie that into the performance reviews and the check-in meetings and the discussions, you're going to get so much more out of it. When I said career planning, think back to when I said think about the people involved in the review. If the employee is involved in the review, ask them about their own career. The manager should be asked a completely different set of questions, and for every company, this is slightly different. But really, the employee's not meant to see this. This is for the manager to reflect on, can they perform at a higher level? Are they a flight risk? When should they be considered for a promotion? And it's not that we're trying to be sneaky. We just need that opportunity while the manager's in here and while the information's fresh to collect that information, because we need that data. Okay, so you're starting to kind of see around mPerform. I do invite you, if you'd like to see more in mPerform, just connect with us after this event. We can even take a look at your own performance review forms and get them in here to see how they work. But I just wanted to kind of illustrate some of the examples of what I talked about. And one of the big ones is self-service. So if we're thinking about launching additional things or enabling other things, we don't want to create more work for HR. So a good example of that is performance improvement plans, project-based reviews, 30, 60, 90 days. Those are all fantastic to have them. But if HR is still managing them, it's going to be a bottleneck. So we recommend building out that library of almost ad hoc on-demand processes that managers can launch when they need it. And that way they're going to do it. So if I need to launch a PIP or a project review, I need it to be nice and easy to come in here, just add from my list of employees. HR still has to be alerted, which is good, but really we need to zip that up and quickly guide the manager into the process for filling that in. So in this case, you'll notice it kicks off a 30, 60, 90-day check-in program. So once the manager fills it in, it's going to stay active and keep everyone up to date. But those are just a few of the examples that I wanted to highlight from those 7 tips that I gave, because if we're doing all these things right, if we're looking at the people, if we're tailoring the process, if we're looking at those rating scales and the intent and what we're asking, you're going to get happy employees, you're going to get time saved, but you're going to get good metrics out of it. We include a 9-box in mPerform, and if we can really take a look at our company or a specific group or department, and if we can get a really good sense of where everybody falls, who are your high-performing, high-potential employees, like Harlan? Who is he? We got to keep him. Seeing where everybody is and where they can go and being able to filter this down for decision-making, that's what it comes down to. If you have a new project starting or an office opening and you want to know, all right, well, who in this group has leadership and who's ready for a promotion now or in the next 6 months, or who's a flight risk, you want to be able to know all that and trust it. So the more effort we can put into looking at how we're getting those measures and who we're engaging, the more you can trust the information and use it. This is just one of the ways you can use your data, but it is very critical. Okay, so like I said, we're happy to give you a full tour of mPerform. It's a pretty amazing solution with a lot of great features, and we have a lot of great templates. So I just showed you 2 or 3, but if you want to see more, let me know. Having this time with me today, all of you definitely don't have this time. So the fact that you can spend 45 minutes with me means that you care about your workforce and you're looking for ways to make it better. Hopefully you were able to take something away from that. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help, or our platform, or access to anything that I've mentioned today, please do not hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for. But I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and thank you.